Okay, and we're live. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This is the MetaNetTV monthly live stream for July 2019. And our guest today is Dr. Craig S. Wright, Chief Scientist of nChain.
Hello, how are you? Glad to be here.
Doing fine. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
And I must say, you're looking sharp there.
Thank you very much.
Is there a matching pair of shades to go with that suit?
Yes, but it's very overcast today, so I don't have them.
Right. Well, I guess this is probably the first interview I've done with you that's actually on the record. Everything else has either been off the record or it didn't quite make it to the internet. So history in the making.
That's life.
Well, I guess the best place to start would be to ask you what you've been up to lately. I know you had a bit of time away. I'm pretty sure that you do you completely detach when you go away on vacation, or do you still check your Twitter and your Slack and all of that stuff every?
Well, I don't have Twitter. But
that's right.
Yeah, I check Slack, and now I don't detach. I still look at the news. I still look at the world. I still read. I still actually write patents and whatever else. I just do it a bit slower. Right.
You were touring around. You said Dubrovnik, around Croatia, around the Mediterranean.
That area, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That looked really.
So we went around and some of the other areas in that part of the sort of Adriatic and things.
Yeah, I was pretty envious. That looks pretty nice. And after seeing all of your posts of fine cognacs and food, I was thinking, I hope this experience is not mellowing Craig Wright in any way. Do you?
No, I don't think it is. I think people still find me an annoying bugger. So I just try and avoid the people who annoy me the most. That's all.
Right. Well, hopefully you didn't find anyone who annoyed you around there.
No, it was actually very good.
All right. Well, I guess the next thing is Happy Quasar Day. Probably the most significant update in the BitcoinSV and nChain calendar this week.
Yes, and 6 months from now, we'll get rid of the limit and be fairly much back to where we were supposed to be, and then start moving forward.
Yeah.
Minus a few.
Tell me, had you stuck with the original plan? Like, had Bitcoin just stayed Bitcoin all the way, never forked or anything like that? When do you think we would have reached this point where we had, unlimited block sizes or 2 gigabyte block sizes?
We should have really been able to do this around 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we shouldn't have had all the shit coins. We shouldn't have had the huge range of alternatives that we had. It should have just been one global system already. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of the people who were around in those early days, like, bemoaning the fact that, we spent too much time arguing and really we lost years, even decades, just messing around, arguing with each other.
Exactly. I mean, if you want to make your own system and compete, you should have done that, not up mine.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this concept that everyone runs a node is asinine. Think about it for a minute. If every person on Earth runs a node, and even if it's 1 second blocked, then you have a 4 billion or so nodes competing to win. And it's going to be 1,000 years on average or so before anyone wins a block.
Mm-hmm.
Why would anyone invest? Ever?
Yeah, very good point. So how long do you think it's going to take us to make up for all that lost time?
Haven't lost it totally. I mean, in the background, while people were all fighting, apart from a few battles with government officials and things like that, who didn't really get Bitcoin and saw the drug markets as really what it was about, falsely.
Mm-hmm.
We've still been working. I mean, I haven't stopped working. So in 2011, I was doing research and continuing with an Opticrypto company I had at the time. That moved into other companies, and that's now with nChain. So.
Right. So you were able to take a lot of that old IP and experience from the old companies and bring it to nChain with you?
Yeah, effectively, yes.
Okay, right. I remember that the first interview I did with you was about Hotwire PE back in 2014 or something like that.
Yes. Unfortunately, Silk Road killed off the concept of having a Bitcoin bank at the time. Well, we were actually well down the road for it, and we were talking with ASIG and APRA and others, and then, of course, Silk Road happened, and then the government just shifted totally. Once it became Bitcoin's about drugs, then it was a hard narrative to actually sort of move past.
Right. Okay. I didn't realize at the time that it was such a strong association. Like I knew over here in Japan, whenever they were talking about Bitcoin, they'd always, if they'd interview Gavin Andresen and then they'd lower the lights and sort of like shine a blue light next to him so he looked like some basement hacker or something, and then they'd play this scary music in the background. That was as recently as like 2017 or something. But
that was the problem. Everyone started associating it with sort of anonymous sources and dark web and hacker culture and all the rest, which it was never designed to be. I mean, that's BitGold.
Yeah.
I didn't create BitGold. I don't have a system that's meant to be good for drug markets. It has blockchains and immutable evidence trail. So the stupidest thing you'd want to do is have something really bad like sort of illicit drugs of the order that most governments are going to stop.
Yeah.
So
there's something I've always wondered about, and that is when Bitcoin first came about. I mean, all of the libertarians and the anarchists and the dark marketeers and the cypherpunks, they jumped on it straight away. Like it seemed to me and seemed to a lot of other people like it was just the natural choice for them. Should people have done more in the early days to argue against that?
Well, see, my idea of what is a libertarian and what someone Roger or the core guys see as a libertarian are completely different. I would sort of align with someone like Mises or listen to a Chicago school economist and say that is a libertarian, someone who wants small government, not having a nanny state, not having my life interfered with.
Yeah.
Leaving things like, should I wear a helmet, to insurance companies. So if I don't wear a helmet, I don't get insured, or I pay fees, those sort of things. On the other hand, these other people have this concept that you get rid of government altogether, and it's a little bit insane, really, when you think about it. So I had a misconnect between these people, and I don't consider anarcho-capitalism anything to do with capitalism. Personally, anarcho-capitalism is just anarchy, and anarchy is socialist.
Yeah.
If you actually read the Communist Manifesto, there are two paths which are meant to be simultaneously run. One is using law and to slowly change the state, become more and more nanny-stated, etc.
Yeah.
The second that everyone misses is to have anonymous groups, people outside the law. Marx actually promoted this. So the idea of Marxism is not to have a state eventually. It's to create a state to destroy a state.
Which is kind of what they did.
Yeah, fairly much. And that's the idea of anarchy. That's the irony here. They don't even realize they're anti-capitalist, because capitalism requires rules. It requires laws. People have to play within the rules. Otherwise, you don't very long have capitalism, because the big player then comes in with a gun and says, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when some people say anarchism, they say they mean no rulers. And that means that they would self-organize into these, like happy little, Hanseatic League communities and just trade freely with each other. Or it could be like Mad Max. I tend to think it would be a little bit more like Mad Max if there was really no one sensible in control, and I fear maybe I'm cynical, but I fear that there is really no one sensible that would take charge and make the rules in that situation.
Exactly. And that's the problem. Then as soon as you have someone take charge, it's not open and anarchist anymore.
Yeah.
And even then, the problem that they don't seem to understand, I mean, Henry Ford or Steve Jobs or anyone like that didn't go out and ask the market what they wanted.
Yeah.
To be an entrepreneur, you don't go to the market and say, what would you like? Like all these people are going, we need to ask the market what we need Bitcoin to be like. You don't create that way.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur takes a risk on what they believe will sell. You don't go, what do you think we should do? And that's designed by committee.
Yeah.
Nothing designed by committee ever works. It all ends up as shit.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the problems I have with anarchists is none of them can really agree on what kind of anarchy they want to have anyway. Or maybe they do.
It's very simple. You just agree to my form of anarchy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're wrong.
Exactly.
If you all agree that I'm right, then we'll all get along.
Yeah. Do you think that has there been any point in history that you would consider ideal as far as a balance between laws and freedoms go?
Now.
Really?
We are the point in history with the most growth, the lowest poverty, the most people doing the most things. Growth is not only growing, it is accelerating. The rate of growth is accelerating exponentially, faster than population. This has never happened in history. And people go, oh, but that means there must be a collapse because exponential growth always ends. It's the Malthusian argument.
Yeah.
Except what we're growing is information. Information and knowledge is what makes a better society. And there isn't a limit anytime near us. I mean, in theory, the speed of light could bound us somewhere in the future where there's so much information that we can't actually update faster than a light bubble. But that's not going to happen in my lifetime or my grandchildren's lifetime. So we have hundreds of years worth of growth if we keep up with this.
Right. Well, I guess that's reason to be optimistic, when I'm getting to the end of life, rather than you feeling a bit fearsome about what might happen to my children and their children, that kind of thing.
I mean, for all the things that people complain about, there has never been a time in history anywhere on Earth that is better.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually glad to hear that. I was lately feeling a little bit pessimistic because during the 90s and maybe the early 2000s, I started to think that we were getting more freedoms thanks to technology. But the last couple of years, we've seen technology companies themselves become a lot more totalitarian, like monitoring what we're doing on and off the platform and, controlling what we can say on the platform. And I thought we might be heading to darker times.
Well, that's the good thing with something like we're doing with MetaNet. If we have a peer communication where people actually sort of between each other, then they can take control of their own lives, their own privacy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So anytime these things go bad, something happens and someone creates something to start changing. And we go through revolution, reformation, and everything goes in cycles.
Yeah, I guess it does.
I don't understand what the wheel doesn't stay in one place. It rolls forward.
Yeah. Well, occasionally it rolls backwards, maybe.
Not really much. I mean, maybe in a small localized area. There's a lot of false stories. I mean, like Dark Ages and things like this. So things were a lot worse for many people after the collapse of Rome. But knowledge didn't stop growing. People didn't stop learning. People didn't stop developing. Even during the medieval times where people say no science occurred, that's actually wrong.
Yeah,
a lot was actually developed. Things actually improved.
I was actually just about to ask about that. Because we read the stories and we see the movies, and it seems like the medieval period was like a completely horrible time of plague and pestilence and terrible teeth and that kind of thing. After the the sun-kissed Roman Empire, that kind of thing. I'm sure neither depiction's really accurate.
It wasn't the sun-kissed Roman Empire. I mean, you see the elites in Rome, and everyone thinks, "Wow, Rome must have been great."
Yeah.
But for the average person living in maybe a 3 meter by 3 meter room that was in squalor, eating their daily ration of that they have to take out, where their teeth would disappear because it was stone ground, so they would actually grind down over the life of the person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have the story of the elites over here and then compare that with the poor guy over here. But that's not it's not the same as comparing the elites in Rome with the court in Charlemagne. And no one does that. I mean, they go, "Oh, look how good Rome was," and then they don't look at Charlemagne. They look at some guy living in a poor hovel.
Yeah, Monty Python might have a lot to do with that.
Probably, yes.
Well, in that case, like where do you think knowledge is happening now? Like where are the main centers of the world? If someone wanted to go and live in the Rome of today, where is that? Is it Europe or US? Somewhere else?
A lot of different places. Unfortunately, that's probably an area that people attack most. We attack entrepreneurial activity. Entrepreneurs that's often seen as a dirty word, people wanting money, whatever else, but everything that we really have comes from a growth of knowledge, and it's entrepreneurial risk that gives us all growth. So if we want to have a society that builds and creates more, we need to allow people to experiment, to create new ideas.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I just hope that is happening somewhere.
I think it's happening. It's happening more and more.
Yeah.
I'm certainly sort of still trying. This is what gets me. People sit there and they look at everything and go, "Yes, but you failed in the past." One of the biggest aspects of success in any business is grit. I mean, it annoys me when Richard Branson tries to sort of whitewash his past as if he was always successful. Yeah. He should embrace the failures. I mean, what made him successful was the fact that he has grit, that he went through 20 years of screw-ups and fuck-ups until he made something successful. Embrace that. Be proud of the fact that no matter what people threw at him, he kept going. No matter how much bad press in the early days from failed organizations, he kept going. And that's a really important part of actually being successful in business. Because until you get to the top, when suddenly everyone will go, "Wow, aren't you great?" Well, not everyone, but a lot of people. Then you go through attacks. I mean, if you look at Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company. People called him a wash-up, said he was totally useless, the worst thing for a business. All these things happened after the first iteration of Apple. He was considered an asshole who couldn't run a bath, let alone a company. And then suddenly he's successful with Apple version 2. It becomes the iPhone takes off, and he's this genius that always created something.
Yeah. Is Steve Jobs someone you admire?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no.
Yeah.
But then that's like everyone. I mean, one thing that I definitely like is the fact that people would tell them you need to listen to the market and you need to listen to focus groups about what the iPhone needs and all this stuff, and you'd tell them to go fuck off.
He did.
Just do it anyway.
Yeah.
People told him how you need a pen device with Apple, and and it won't work otherwise. And he told them, go screw yourselves. And then, of course, after he dies, the first thing they bring, which failed miserably. But hey.
Yeah, well, I remember one of the first things he did when he came back to Apple was to kill a Newton, and that really made me laugh a lot. I thought he must have been wanting to do that for so long.
Yeah, well, I could have told you it was a stupid idea.
Yeah. I think I only ever saw one, and it didn't work very well. I guess if you go through life on greased skids, and if you're always successful, and when you finally get to the top, like you'll crumble at the smallest little challenge or adversity. So if you've been fighting all the way up, like you're obviously going to stay at the top a lot longer.
I agree, and I mean it's important for what we're doing. I mean, people say, wouldn't it be good if you had an easier ride or whatever else? And I disagree. The reality is, we're trying to bring a new form of money. We're trying to bring an honest ledger system. We're trying to make something that will change fundamentally many aspects of society. Mm-hmm. And everyone's going to fight that. I mean, we are bringing in a tool that will make government more honest. Imagine if government is now transparent. That belies having corruption, because if people are corrupt, people can follow the trail and have evidence of the corruption. Mm-hmm. That actually instantly changes things. Because imagine that you're a politician and I'm going to give you a bribe. If I give you a bribe and it's on the Bitcoin blockchain, I could have embedded something that proves I gave you that bribe and why. Right. As soon as you take that bribe, I own you.
Uh-huh.
I could have given you $1,000 and I own you for existence. And once one or two people find this out, and once one or two even local councillors in a local small government goes to jail for a long time for taking bribes for small amounts of money, then people are going to start looking very differently at how Bitcoin might work.
I never thought of that before, but now I'm starting to get some evil ideas. And I guess you could encrypt a message on the blockchain that the person receiving that transaction would never see, but it's there, and it's immutably there, and then you can decrypt it later on and send that person to prison.
Yes, and so we have ways. Some of the patents I've been working on will be things like I can have a Bitcoin address that embeds a hash in a way that you can't ever tell.
Mm-hmm.
So this hash is provably part of the communication with you.
Right.
In which case, there's no way on earth you will even know whether, in a negative scenario, I have done something to tag your crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can encrypt and save that document on a different transaction, provably. So later on, if something happens and I want to say, well, I was forced to give a bribe to this policeman, here is my evidence from my bribe wallet.
Mm-hmm. From my bribe wallet.
Yeah, I keep one just because if I go through certain places in South America, maybe I want to give out a special payment.
Right. Well, yeah, it's good to see, and I really hope we see a lot more of that soon. Because I guess one of the things I've always wondered is, for years people have been telling me Bitcoin's going to make governments honest, it's going to reduce corruption, and I always would ask, how? I thought that no matter what monetary system we're using, people are going to find a way to game it or corrupt it or something.
Oh, there'll always be corruption. There'll always be fraud.
Yeah.
What we can do is lower it.
Mm-hmm.
We can make it more expensive.
Right.
So criminals are rational. Not counting crimes of passion or something like this. I'm talking economic criminals, people involved in crime. They're generally rational.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the ones at the top. The guys working for them may be a bit more stupid, but the guys who actually run large criminal enterprises are very rational.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think the criminal enterprises are probably more rational than the government sometimes, I think.
That doesn't say much. But
Yeah,
I'd agree, yes.
they appear smarter to me. Also, maybe they're the one and the same thing.
Yeah, I think they earn more, so that attracts more people with more money.
So another thing I've always wanted to ask about Bitcoin is that so Bitcoin SV is
Mhm.
it's positioning itself as the government and regulation friendlier Bitcoin,
Hmm.
and but it's still going to require a lot of permission from the government to become a reality. You know what would happen if a government in the future says, "All right, we don't like this Bitcoin thing." You know, secretly because they think it's too honest and they don't want to stamp out corruption. They just want to be seen to be stamping out corruption. So they might find out ways to ban it or discourage it. You know, I think governments deliberately hyped up the Silk Road and drugs angle just so people wouldn't use Bitcoin. Is that a fair take, or am I way off track?
No, because where people go wrong is there's no such thing as a global government. And
Not yet.
when you start having competition between governments, then others see what's happening.
Hmm.
Think about voting in countries right now.
Yep.
When you have unfair elections, people start reporting them, and people can't hide the knowledge even now. You have countries like Egypt where they're trying to crack down and have unfair elections, but you can't keep the knowledge that there are better ways of doing it away from them. People
Yeah.
actually start learning. And you, as a corrupt government, act as a corrupt government, and everyone else in the world start seeing you as a corrupt government. So those more honest governments will start eventually putting you to the side, and you'll end up like North Korea. So you either move on, and eventually even North Korea will probably sort of rise up and change. But over time, it becomes harder and harder to be a repressive government.
Hmm. It boggles my mind that North Korea still exists.
Mm.
Like it's
No,
sort
no.
of against all odds, really.
Give them time.
Mm.
I mean, they're isolated, but in my lifetime, things will be cheap enough that it'll be possible to get information out to people in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
The next 30 years, dropping tablets that are about the size of a piece of paper, instead of doing a flyer drop, doing a technology drop, would actually be possible. Blanket the country. You could do that for less than they're trying to run the wall at the moment. Start educating people, and the government won't be able to crack down on it at that stage. That's the wonderful thing with technology development. It gets cheaper and cheaper,
Yeah.
and it becomes harder and harder to repress.
Okay, that reminds me of something else you said recently. When you came back from Colombia, you yeah, I think you were pretty well received over there. And then when you came back, you said that you had a plan that was going to help the people there and show everyone what Bitcoin could do. Has there been any more information about that released yet?
Not yet. Unfortunately, things take time to develop.
Uh-huh.
And it has to be more than just me. I mean, I'll develop technology, and we're starting to get people to try and build things. But like everything in sort of a exponential growth path, at first it just seems like nothing's happening, and then suddenly it takes off.
Yeah.
And people go, where did that come from?
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Someone, I'm just checking out the comments in the chat here. Like, someone said, name one government that chooses Bitcoin. Like, which government in the world has which one?
Antigua's very
Antigua.
very strongly supporting. Yeah.
Tell me what they've done.
They're in the process of creating legislation around Bitcoin. They're starting to take Bitcoin for government payment. So like everything else in every government on earth, it's slow, and it would have been nice to have happened years ago.
Yeah.
When you're talking democracies, they're always slow. Put a bill forward, people argue it for years, they pick it apart, and they go back and do a little bit more. But it's moving forward.
What would you say if there was a major government that announced tomorrow, okay, we're going full blockchain and we're going to base it all on Ethereum?
I'd laugh.
I think everyone watching here would probably laugh too, but would we campaign to tell them that that's maybe not the right way to go?
No, they'll just fail.
Uh-huh.
That's like saying, I'm going to walk across the Sahara Desert and I'm going to allow myself to have one water bottle of a litre dropped every month somewhere across both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fair enough then. Well, are there any like major Western governments that are coming around?
Slowly, people are starting to understand. I mean, even the American government are starting to understand that Bitcoin isn't outside the law. That no matter what people like the BTC or Bitcoin coiners do, that government can actually step in and crush Bitcoin anytime they like.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can't stop us. Of course you can stop it. I keep pointing out to people that Liberty Reserve was 42 countries acting jointly, not just the Americans, but even the Russians, the Chinese, and Europeans, some African nations, a lot of Asian nations worked to take down Liberty Reserve.
Yeah. 10,000
individual nodes. BTC has 27 real nodes, not Raspberry Pis that have no relevance whatsoever. 27 real nodes. That is it for BTC. 27.
Right. What was the weak link for Liberty Reserve? Was it just because it was first, or I mean, not completely first, but
no,
first?
Like all of these things that embraced crime. Eagle embraced crime. Liberty Reserve embraced crime, etc. If you don't have a mechanism that allows government to actually be comfortable, you're not going to survive as a cryptocurrency. This is the thing none of them wants to understand. If you act outside the law, you're criminal, you'll be taken down. That's simple. If you just accept the fact that you have to work within laws, you have a problem. And the thing that people don't get is with a global international system, it has to be laws in concert around the world. So something like a heroin store or drugs, fentanyl type really bad, or arms deal or terrorist funding, every government that matters blocks that. If you're talking a pot store or something like this that some governments like America don't like, but others in Canada support, then it's a completely different scenario. It has to be something that is universally abhorred to be stopped. So if Bitcoin doesn't promote itself like some people have as a terrorist coin, then it survives. If people go to the dark side, then it will die.
Yeah, well, luckily I think Bitcoin has enough honest users to counter all of the negative messaging that went on in those early years. So I think maybe that hard part is already taken care of. What kind of outreach do nChain and the Bitcoin Association do in that sense? I mean, there was Colombia, of course. Do you spend a lot of time lobbying governments or communicating with governments?
I spend some time, but others do much more than me.
Right. Sorry, when I say you, I mean nChain and the team.
Yeah. I do some. I don't know. It really comes down to different people do different roles. I know that most of the people there in those areas are doing a good job, but I still focus on intellectual property development. I let other people do what they're good at, and I do what I'm good at.
Right. Okay. So speaking of that, how's everything with the patents? I have a few questions from Twitter here that I'd like to ask you, and I think one of them was about that. It was from... Oh, yeah, it was from Martin. Martin, is it Scalar? Martin, you'll have to tell me how to pronounce that properly. Yeah, he said, what's... patents being granted as expected, or are you experiencing any issues or delays with that?
Sorry, what was that? You just dropped out a bit there.
Darn it. He was just Martin was just asking if you were being granted patents at the rate that you were expecting, or are you experiencing any delays or issues with getting those granted?
Oh, patents are all about delays. We're actually very happy. We've had some that are what our patent attorneys would consider record time. Getting patents granted in the timeframes that we've had is actually incredibly fast.
Mm-hmm, really?
I mean, generally it can take 5 years to get a patent out of the pending stage and into grant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah? Have you managed to speed that up?
We've had ones that have been granted in under 2 years.
Right. Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's considered about as fast as any government will ever move.
Mm-hmm. So, when do you think we'll start seeing some action being taken on these? Like I've heard you mention in the past that all other blockchain projects
have to be granted first.
Yeah.
So, and if you've only got one granted and people are breaching multiples, then you don't really want to do anything until your position's as strong as it can be. So if there are people who maybe breach 6 or 7 of our patents who have been granted, we prefer to wait until we maybe get 4 or 5 over the hurdles, and then we'll take action.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's something to look forward to.
Some of these things will go away anyway. I mean, some of them are little shit coins that have no real purpose. And spending $20-30 million trying to take down some little tiny project that won't be around in a year, it just seems like a waste of money anyway. And in those sort of cases, it would be better to have an outreach where we approach them and go, well, if you move over here, not only be acting within the law, but we might be able to fund you.
Okay, yeah, so to bring them into the fold rather than try and scare them away. Yeah,
I mean, carrot and stick, and you preferably only use when it's really bad.
Yeah. That's a good strategy.
Make a really enticing carrot.
Good to hear. All right, I got a question from Joel Delay here from MetaNetTV. He says he just wants to hear your views about identity on chain and different use cases for that. So it says, what are the low-hanging fruit that businesses can take today? Things that would make them more efficient and save expenses, like receipts, tickets, refunds.
Tax reporting. I mean, Sarbanes-Oxley and other regulations around listed companies and public companies require that they maintain immutable records. So they have to have worm storage, which is write once, read many. Now, that's been around for around 20 years now, and it's horrible. People write to CDs and store them in Iron Mountain and all this sort of stuff. And the reality here, what would be better is to have something where the company can register, basically an encrypted version of their logs, tax authorities, corporate authorities, and then provably show that it's theirs, provably have it encrypted, allow auditors to audit records without interfering with the company. And so those sort of uses would actually help businesses, because audit's not a bad thing. Done right, audit helps companies from problems inside their own organization. It stops things like people who are stealing funds and embezzlement. So it's not just government with this idea that you don't want that. It's the whole concept of a better managed, better stewardship over your company.
Yeah, that's right. And I wanted to ask you too about identity systems, because one one problem I have is, I think everyone has it too, is it's just a pain in the ass to confirm your identity when you're in a different country. Like, especially if you're living in a country where you're not a citizen, you don't have access to all of your birth certificates and all of that kind of information. Are we going to see like a truly portable identity system happening soon?
I don't know about soon, but I would like to see it happen. I mean, if you store records on chain, you can have them attested on chain, and then you can start just bringing everything across. I mean, for instance, you could have your passport, your driver's license, your bank records, all then signed by an authority in, say, the UK, and that authority could attest to somewhere like France and Europe. And as you're moving around, you sort of open up what you need to in a way that allows you to automate some of this sort of attestation process.
Right. Okay. Well, I certainly
a
hope we
lot of
see
what
that.
happens is someone in a different country validates that the records were actually attested in the original country.
Yeah.
So if they know that this is an authorized certificate from a country they trust, say the US and Britain trust each other, and a state in the US says, I will take documents if they're signed by this authority in the UK, then you can go over there and go, see, it's signed by them. And then put together enough of a portfolio to be able to go, here you go, without having things sent off for 90 days and having to go back and forwards as a guy in Britain says, yes, that was our thing, and all that.
Yeah, right. Well, when I was young and naive, I went to live in Canada for a couple of years, and of course, I didn't have any residency documents there, and I didn't realize that I wasn't used to people asking me for ID and then just like turning it down. So like they'd say, show me some ID. I'd show them my Australian driver's license, and they'd say, what is this? This means nothing. Take it away. And I think it was around that time I started wishing that there was some kind of international thing besides passports.
Yeah.
Which I think are kind of inadequate for that job. Yeah, I get that. So that's my personal thing. I'm really looking forward to that.
Get better, but everyone sort of sits there and goes, nothing's being invented. Well,
who says that?
That just means there's an opportunity. Go out there and take that opportunity and run with it. Think of something. Work with another person, invent something, and create a solution.
Yeah.
Problems are good. Problems are things we can solve. And if lots of people have that same problem, then you have a business.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the biggest complainers about lack of services or lack of functions for Bitcoin. I mean, all they're really saying is like someone else has to go out and do this, not me, because
exactly.
I don't have the talent
it's
or
like
the imagination.
Recently in Spain, the government was complaining, saying there are not enough jobs. People have to go out there and start their own businesses. And they're saying young people today aren't getting jobs with these companies. They're going out and forming businesses. It's bad. I mean, what a stupid attitude. If people can actually go out there and form their own business and they're willing to be entrepreneurial, good.
Yeah.
Encourage.
I think that's something we need to teach more in schools, because going through the school system, they don't teach you anything about entrepreneurship or even that you would want to do that. At least not the schools I went to.
No, they teach you that you want to get a job and sit in the same place and just slot in that little bit of society, and you'll be okay because that's all you want to do.
Yeah.
Don't push. Don't do anything. Don't change the system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible, isn't it?
Someone here I go. Someone needs to found the Bitcoin Academy of Entrepreneurship. Someone other than me. I have no interest in starting a school. Maybe I do. Who knows?
One day.
Yeah, one day. All right. Well, I'm just working through these Twitter answers because, like, every time I do this live stream, I always run out of time at the end. So I want to make sure everyone gets covered. We've got Audrey says in November 2018 in London, it was all about Bitcoin for business. With the last developments and successes on scaling the network, does nChain feel ready for implementing the different applications in big business? And how and when does it plan to approach companies? I think you're doing that already, right?
Yes. Well, businesses can already start, and know that everything's going to be in place in February for them to be able to come in there and start building. So go for it. Anybody wants to do this, please do.
Yeah.
Don't wait for me.
So you could start a lobbying business.
Yeah, I'm not a lobbyist, so that's not my area.
But you're so diplomatic.
When?
Yeah, exactly.
/S. Yeah.
I don't know. We all lobby in our own way, I guess. Next we got Bartholomew's asking you about Lord Timmy's movie. Are you familiar with Lord Timmy's movie? He says he's making a sci-fi film due for release on the blockchain later in the year, and it's being made in your honor. Apparently, it's the story of Satoshi.
Well, thank you, I guess.
If you were to be a character in a science fiction movie, which genre of sci-fi would you like it to be? More like Star Trek or Star Wars or Neuromancer? What?
Hard question. Wouldn't it be more fun to play the bad guy?
Of course.
Maybe the Darth Vader character.
Well, you're certainly dressed for it.
Da, da, da,
well, the best bad guys are the ones who are kind of ambiguous. Like you're never really sure if they're the bad guy or the good guy.
Maybe. Yeah, I agree there.
Alrighty, and Thunderblast says, I'd like to know if you're still technically involved with any new Bitcoin solutions directly. I replied to that and I said, well, I think that's what nChain does, but he said, I'm just trying to know something more specific, like, are you working on any other projects like artificial intelligence or any other tech subjects that you're interested in that might not be...
I've got so much around Bitcoin to do in the next 10 years that I don't look at side things. I'm very sort of single focused in Bitcoin because there are hundreds of aspects of Bitcoin that need to be developed. So I don't have time to go out there and do much else.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. And another question here. It says, you've mentioned Mike Hearn a lot in previous statements. When's Mike Hearn coming back to Bitcoin?
You have to ask Mike Hearn that one. Mike, I liked in many ways because he was one of the few sane people in the early days of Bitcoin. I mean, I ended up keeping communicating with Mike for quite a while after I disappeared with everyone else, for the simple fact that Mike was one of the few people who weren't, the only way I can say it, an idiot. There were so many people who just kept going on about Bitcoin and taking down government and whatever else. It just, yeah.
Yeah, I've never had a conversation with him, but I've exchanged a few messages and emails with him, and I could tell that he was getting a bit over it all back in 2013.
Yeah, I understand why.
I think
there's only so much you're sort of helping big bad industry. Companies are going to take over Bitcoin and all that stuff. I mean, when I had argument with James Donald in 2008, I sort of had to just headbutt a wall afterwards after saying Bitcoin's going to be ending in server farms. And he'll go, but government will take them over.
Yeah.
What government? There's not a government. We're not in a world government where one single country can just walk in there and wipe things out.
Yeah, not instantly.
No.
Yeah.
So not unless we do things like aiming Bitcoin to be illicit hard drugs and terrorism funding and money laundering, then they will.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, someone asked here is is nChain in contact with Planaria Corp from Unwriter?
No comment.
All right, no comment on that one. And we have a few people here asking for updates on your court cases. of which there are a few. Is there any update on the Ira Clayman case?
No,
It's still just
not at the moment.
dragging along.
It will go to trial next year.
Right.
People can sit there and say what they want, and I'm sorry, but we have these rules of hearsay that mean that if you've got hacked documents that people have tendered as potential evidence, that they're not evidence. Yeah. That's where people go wrong. This discovery process doesn't give you evidence. It's not evidence until they've been validated and confirmed. So my job is to give up everything that I had in my possession, which includes laptops from ex-staff and other people like that. I don't need to explain to the Twitter sphere which documents came from which laptop at this point. So they'll find out in due course.
Right. And speaking of that, were you satisfied with your own testimony in that case the other week?
Much as I could be. I mean, It's basically I had to give answers. I don't like the fact that I had to, but it would be hypocritical of me to say that I believe in a rule of law and whatever else, and then tell the government to go screw themselves as much as I'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously wasn't there myself. I just read the transcript, but from people I knew who were watching, they said it did really look like you didn't want to be there.
Of course I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, I was actually meant to, around that time, be presenting at my graduate conference, where it's essential for me to finish my PhD in law to do a presentation at the graduate conference. And this is the UK. We only have them once a year. So by having to skip that, where I was due to talk, and go to Florida, I've pushed out my degree a year. I'm very not happy about that.
Absolutely.
I mean, the other side, we asked the other side, would you mind changing the date slightly and whatever else? And they're being total dicks because they knew that I wanted to do this and they were hoping I wouldn't turn up. Well, sorry, I didn't want to be there because this actually means I have an extra year on my degree, which will cost me £12,000. Because if I'm enrolled for an extra year, I have to pay for an extra year. Not that I can't afford it, but I wanted to actually graduate end of next year, which we can't do now.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing seems to me like a really stupid and annoying distraction from the main game.
Yes, unfortunately.
I guess always along the way, there's always going to be those people who just come and put their foot down on the hose and like just try and do everything they can to delay what's happening. You know, not just your own personal life, but the whole grander project as well. And I guess everyone would just wish this would go away.
Yes. One thing I'm discovering is as soon as you get money, people want a chunk of it.
Yeah, I've actually heard that a lot from people with lots of money. They say keeping it is the hard part.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've already got plans in place, but as soon as I get access to spend BTC and Bitcoin, I'm going to put them into other funds, etc. I'm going to keep my BSV when I can legally move and spend my other ones. I've already got a plan for foundations to be set up, and I'm going to, I mean, personally, I consider the airdrop something that is outside of what I did and all the rest. So I don't know if people understand it, but I want to dictate where the money goes, and I'm going to basically give it away to educational charities. So, really like it or not, there's going to be 800,000 Bitcoin BTC going to education. Well, not just education. There are a few other things I want to do, but it's all a number of charities I want. So one of the things I I'm Wesleyan, so I'm
Mm.
aligned with some of the views of people like Andrew Carnegie, which is earn as much as you can, give as much as you can.
Yeah.
And the reason you earn money is so that you can leave your mark on things. You can put how you think the world should be a little bit more. And for me, education and order and things like that are critically important. So what I'm going to end up doing with my BTC over time won't be like people think I'll dump it or whatever else. That would be stupid, because that would just limit the amount of good that can be done with it.
Yeah.
I'll end up putting it, 100% of it won't go on my name. If I have to, I'll pay tax on whatever part of it there. I'll keep my BSV, and I'll allow people in different foundations and things like this to set up educational funds in places like Africa, South America, Asia, to give scholarships in the first world, that sort of thing.
Right.
And none of it will be going for fluffy stuff. Sorry, I will not fund anyone on women's studies, ever.
You won't fund what, sorry?
Mathematics, science, things that actually make a difference to the world. So
no social causes.
No.
Please.
Not unless there's a technical aspect to it.
Yeah, good. I'm actually really glad to hear that.
I mean, I think if we had people in places like Africa actually connected, able to interact, to learn to code, to do mathematics, the growth that could happen in places that have hardly any knowledge right now, it's astounding what sort of world we could end up in.
Absolutely, yeah. Hey, you found yourself in a really fascinating strategic position. If you suddenly gain access to all of that coin, and everyone's expecting you to dump it and wreck it, but you're thinking you want to do something good with it first.
Well, why would I? I mean, this is what everyone thinks. They think big bad Aussie guy. I mean, yes. Why would I want to take something and just burn it? I'm not into this whole Joker bit where I'm going to put a pile of money up and chuck a match on it, because sometimes you want to see things burn. I don't want to see things burn. You've done this fork of broken Bitcoin, and people think it's worth money. Well, that's fine. And you've effectively got a thing where in future I'm going to be handed a control of a lot of that money.
Yeah.
Me personally, it's actually my trust, so which is family and other entities and whatever else. So when I'm saying me, I'm not referring to me directly, because I've already talked to my wife and trustees and things like this, and it was always set up that I put this in there for putting it into a foundation and whatever else. And it's actually very interesting in that, fine, you've given me a nice, easy way to split things. Yeah. The BTC is what I'll put in the foundation, and the real Bitcoin is what I'll keep.
You better be careful. I think you're going to be getting a lot of letters over the next 6 months or so.
Oh, I know. I mean, I'm not, you're sending to the wrong person. In the next year, 2 years, whatever else, I'll have a number of things to talk. And I'm not going to sit there signing letters personally. We've got to figure out how we actually, don't ask me, I haven't done that yet, but I'm definitely not going to personally sign anything or anything like that. And it will be things that we're looking at ourselves, not, we won't be looking for solicitations.
Yeah, like, don't find us, we'll find you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, and until then, I guess it does always kind of function as a nuclear option, and the strategic advantage of having a nuclear option is that you don't actually use it. You just have it there and threaten to use it, or people think you're threatening to use it.
That. No one wants to go around having a nuclear war and all this sort of stuff. Contrary to what people think, I don't see any problem. In 10 years' time, I think Bitcoin will be still here. BTC, that's a different matter. So it's no good nuking it. I mean, if we can take value and do something good with it over the next 10 years before it disappears, and have a foundation built that will increase in value, that will help millions of people, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah, exactly.
From all the stupidity and dumb ideas like drug markets and everything like that, we'll take it and we'll create something good with it.
Very good. And all the other coins as well.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's very nice to hear. And I think that's a nice, it's probably a nice positive note to end on, because I know you've got to dash off and do another interview pretty soon. Was there anything else you wanted to say, or any message you wanted to send to everyone watching?
I would like to tell people, try and find things to do, to build, to create. If you see a problem, don't make it someone else's.
Yep.
This is what society is about. It's about finding a problem that you can build and work on and create a solution for. And don't sit there whining, why doesn't government do this? Or why don't you do something? It doesn't need to be fixing everything. Just find one thing. Yeah. And if every one of us can do one little thing in our lives, then it's a better society. Okay, well, I think that is probably the definitive quote of the day. So I'm not going to ask you anything more, and I'm just going to say thanks a lot for coming on. And I thought that was very positive, actually. Thank you. All right, then. Not such a dark lord after all. Damn, I have to try harder. Yeah. All right, then. Well, Craig Wright, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I hope we can talk to you again in the future. Thank you for having me, John. All right, no worries. See you later. Bye.